Hi, everybody. It's Les McKeown here, President and CEO of Predictable Success, and we're back with another in the Predictable Success interview series in which we talk with people who've themselves and or with others achieved that state that we call predictable success. And today, I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to be talking to someone who's become a good friend and someone I've had an opportunity to work with over the last couple of years. Is David Gardner, co-founder of The Motley Fool. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Les. It's a real pleasure to talk again.
Super to be talking to you again, David. What I'd love to do to start off with is just for I imagine there's only a very few of our listeners who don't know who the Motley Fool is, but I'd love for you to take a little bit of time and just share with us what the Motley Fool is, what it does, and for knowing our audience as I do, I know what they'd love to hear as well as maybe the founding story. How did you and your brother come up with the idea, and what was the path that led you there?
Well, the purpose of our company is to help the world invest better. And we're in our 20th year as a business, 2013. We started as a newsletter. It was just a traditional print newsletter. As it turns out, it was for our parents' friends, Les, because they were the only ones who would pay us $48 a year back then for our thinking, supporting a small fledgling business. But as the Internet, well, really before the Internet, online services began to expand and become something that consumers were using. That was dial-up, pre-World Wide Web. We started as paying customers on America Online and a few of the others, started to just answer questions from people who were asking about investing and stock picking, my passion. And so we began just as paying customers on AOL to answer other people's questions. And at a certain point, we caught the attention of AOL. I live in Washington, D.C. AOL happens to have been based back then about 30 minutes from where I live. And so we started a relationship with them, and they said, would you guys like to open up The Motley Fool, this newsletter for your parents' friends with a funny name? Would you like to open that up on America Online? And AOL was still so early on. There were barely keywords or channels back then for America Online. So I would say we got our foot in the door early. And we really grew a lot those first 5 years. I certainly won't go through the boring history of our company, but I will mention just the great benefit of having America Online during its golden age, growing mightily. And so we all of a sudden found we could hire a third person. The brothers could hire, a friend and then another friend, and all of a sudden, we had grown to a few hundred employees with Silicon Valley venture capital and all of the best and worst things about the Internet go-go era of the late 1990s. And, just to take it all back through to today, we are I think we're a decent mid-sized business with good cash flow, a wonderful mission, and in particular, a worldwide community, people who also say, I'm a fool.
Right.
And as people just trying to help each other make better investing decisions.
And you and your brother Tom started the business when you were relatively young. Were you both finance investment nerds as kids? I mean, were you riding around at 13 years of age on your bicycle reading 10K statements and that type of stuff?
We had a dad who had raised us on the stock market. So even though Tom and I both majored in English as an undergraduate major, and neither of us achieved any graduate distinction, we had a father who, from our early teens, was coaching us and teaching us about the stock market. And, for us to have a dad who talked about how you should become a part owner of the companies whose products and services you like, we would go into the grocery store and he'd say, hey, kids, look, chocolate pudding. We own a little bit of the company, just a few shares, of course, that makes that chocolate pudding. Let's go get more chocolate pudding. It made it a wonderful, fun introduction to, at that point, American life, where an ownership culture, you can become a part owner of the companies themselves. And so a love of games and numbers and what stocks could do. I always loved baseball statistics, and it was easy for me to parlay my interest in that right over into looking at the stock market. So even though we have no formal training or background in investing, we have, I'm 46, so that means I've been thinking about the stock market for more than 30 years now. And that probably explains why we got to where we've gotten so far.
Well, you'll know, David, from many of the discussions that you and I have had over the last couple of years, that I'm a business model nerd, and what intrigues me is how businesses themselves make money. And when you start a business the way you and Tom did, you're really taking on two things. One is the action, the activity itself, in your case, helping people with their investment advice, but the other thing that you're taking on is running a business. And often we're not conscious of that for the first while. You know, we just want to do this thing, and then before you know it, you've got a business on your hands. Tell us, share with us a little bit about your journey as a business owner and manager. Looking back now, is it what you thought it would be, or has it been a very different journey?
It has definitely been baptism by fire, and it's a lot of building the plane as you fly it, as
right.
It's often said. So I would say there's a Warren Buffett quotation that no doubt you've seen when you visit us in Fool HQ, Les, that's in our Buffett conference room, and this is the definitive Buffett quotation for me anyway. And it's, I'm a better investor because I'm a businessman, and a better businessman because I'm an investor, said Buffett. And I think there is a really important holistic duality of doing well at business, thinking about what works in business, and then taking that and making that inform your decisions as an investor. We think everybody should own at least one stock. I realize a lot of people are in funds, or they don't really feel like they understand or want to deal with the stock market or their own savings. Right. But for us, we love the stock market because it's our opportunity to just become a part owner of businesses that we admire. So as business people ourselves, our own professional expertise as entrepreneurs helps us select stocks, and conversely, looking at great companies, constantly asking why did that company win and that company lose, and what is it about their cultures or the people or the business models, because we're also business model nerds. For example, a lot of the world transitioned away from the DVD, which is what people were renting from Blockbuster, but I actually think it's as much a business model story where Netflix brought a subscription business model, low-key, no late fees, into a business that traditionally had been all about having to physically drive yourself over and back and pay late fees on one-off transactions. Right. So there's a lot more to say about so many different companies, but that act of thinking about what works for other companies as an investor can help us with our own businesses. Right. Inject some of that DNA into what we're doing. So it's that duality, that Buffett quote, that really is so key to our thinking. And yes, I don't know, I don't think I want to waste time on this fun podcast by talking through the business model evolutions that we've gone through, but we've had kind of three different business models in our 20 years, and it partly tells our story. But I'll only go there if you want to tease it out.
Oh, I'd love to.
We have other stuff to cover.
Let's hear what the three are. I mean, I've had a little bit of transparency to that, and I know our folks would love to hear it. So tell us,
sure.
What is the 30,000-foot level?
Okay, and I'll give it real quick. Our first business model was essentially we were an America Online content provider, and people back then were paying by the hour. I know you remember it, Les?
I do.
I
got the DVDs. I got the CDs, yeah.
There you go, a lot of them. And people were paying about $3.50 an hour to be online, dial-up at that time. And if they came to our site on America Online, then they would be paying us 10% of that money. AOL would take 35 cents per hour spent on our site and pay it out to us. Right. And so that was our first model. It was kind of a content provider, but it was direct one-to-one, getting paid for the time that people spent. So we were trying to create the most engaging site imaginable on America Online. Our second business model was when America Online went from per hour to flat fee. So all of a sudden, we were all paying America Online, $20 a month. And at that point, if you think about what the Motley Fool meant for AOL, it was a very strange turn of events, because we had been on the cover of Fortune magazine. We had been a great example of the new wave of entertainment companies and media companies, and we had been creating a really exciting site to be online. All of a sudden, when people are only paying AOL $20 flat fee a month, and America Online is paying your telecommunications costs per minute. Right. For customers who are now spending 100 hours at the Motley Fool, that represented a net cost to AOL. It was no longer a huge asset. And so we became very unpopular at America Online. They began to kind of cut off our links. They had taken part ownership, a small minority interest in our business. But at that point, we were forced out to the World Wide Web, where we also had to create for free The Motley Fool. So a huge shift, free-site model was that second one. And in a lot of ways it was good because it got us out there. We were writing some best-selling books through Simon & Schuster. We had a radio show. We had our national syndicated newspaper column, which we still have today. So we had all those ways of reaching people. But in the end, we were driving them to a site where they were just paying nothing unless they clicked on an ad next to one of our stock picks. Right. And that's how we would get paid all of a sudden. And so our customer then was our advertiser. It was not our user or our reader. And that was a very strange shift for us because I don't think we're very good at pleasing advertising companies. Right. So that was number two. And then number three, coming out of some of the wreckage of the end of the dot-com era, you remember the NASDAQ losing 70% of its value in 2 years. We had to pull a major shift to our business model at that point, and we got to where we are today, which is subscription. Direct payment from people who are using our advice and our services, and a wonderful business model because, as you know, a fellow nerd and junkie of good business models, subscription model replaces itself pretty substantially from 1 year to the next. So you can start to say, well, if we please Sally or Jim, Sally or Jim will re-up the next year, and we can start to project that forward, and we can work as hard as possible to make sure our services are relevant and useful to Sally and Jim so that they will want to subscribe for 5 years or more. Right. And that's the business model we've been operating off of today, and that's the one that fits us like to a T, like a good glove, because it has us into the lives of our membership.
Right. I get that sense of the fit of the business model to your culture a lot at the moment, and I want to come to the foolish culture in a minute or two. But one thing I'd love to ask you about is this. I remember very, very well, I remember being inordinately impressed by your very early marketing, and you and Tom really played up the fool side of things, and you seemed to be on the cover of everything for a while, and it was a great piece of work. But I remember thinking, I'll be blunt and share this with you, I remember thinking at the time, David, that's never going to be sustainable. And the reason was this, was because it was two brothers running the same business. And I've got I've got an opinion that co-founders in and of themselves typically don't work out usually. And when they're family, it's even harder. But you and Tom have made a real success of this. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about how do you split the work? What do you do and what does he do? And how long has it taken you to get that right in terms of just the oversight and management of the business?
It's just a great question. I think for us, there hasn't been one approach. I mean, we are now in our 20th year of business. For the last 5 years, Tom has been the CEO of our company. I am a very active presence in a number of contexts for us, but I have no direct reports. So Tom, at present, has had the organization reporting to him, and it's worked well. We've had an excellent 5 years. Before that, we've had variously trial by committee, or I should say management by committee for a bunch of years. We also had a hired outside CEO for a few years, and those first few years as entrepreneurs, I wouldn't say anybody was running anything. So over 20 years, we've had lots of different evolutions, and I would say we're very likely to continue evolving from here. So I think it ends up less that we didn't make it a family business, and we didn't make it about the brothers. It's natural if you're covering us, if you're Smart Money Magazine or CNBC, you might be talking about the brothers or have the brothers on TV or interviewed. But the reality is, from early on, we've been trying to build a great organization. Right. And so trying to, in a way, downplay ourselves in order to, these days I take a lot of pride because over the last year on CNBC and Bloomberg TV and the Wall Street Journal and others, I think we've had 30 or 40 people quoted or interviewed from our organization. We have about 260 employees. So, more than a tenth of our organization today is out there getting quoted in the media. So maybe in contrast to some other, ways to run this business, we're not trying to be a celebrity or personality-driven entity. We truly are trying to create an amazing culture to work for, a place where a lot of people now have worked for 10 years or more, moved their families to Virginia, where we're based, in Alexandria. So I think it's really less in the end. It's a focus on the purpose of what we're doing, rather than on our family or on ourselves.
Right. And that culture aspect, David, is what I'd like to move to, because I've had the privilege of being in Full HQ quite a number of times now. As you know, I've met with all of your top people on a number of occasions. You've given me the privilege of speaking to an all-staff. I've been to one of your huddles that you have on a monthly basis, and the culture is probably the strongest internal culture that I've worked with in the last 2 decades. It's very vibrant, it's a very unusual culture, and I want to hear you maybe share a little bit about that with us. And I want to hang it on something that's obvious as soon as you hear it, but it's counterintuitive. You talk about being foolish. You talk about the foolish way, how to best be a fool, and of course that's playing the Motley Fool. But it also means some very specific things to you, and I'd love it if you just share with us, what makes the Motley Fool internally, culturally, the organization the organization that it is. What do you place emphasis on? What's important to you?
Well, thank you very much, Les. There was a compliment in there that I deeply appreciate. I think that it starts with our name, and we kind of picked our name out of Shakespeare, and we were it was a lark at the time. Again, it was a newsletter for our parents' friends. But the Motley Fool name, our appreciation of the court jesters who could tell the king or queen the truth without getting their head lopped off, and by mixing in good humor throughout, and a financial world, I think, where there needs to be a lot more truth-telling. I'm happy to say in 20 years now, there's a great deal more transparency today and fewer destructive financial advisor relationships today than when we started. When we started, brokers were getting paid based on trades, and we're trying to get you to trade as much as possible so he or she could make money at the end of the day. There was, you couldn't listen to companies' conference calls. On our radio show, somewhere in the late 1990s, we had a call-in campaign to get Starbucks to open up its quarterly conference calls so that investors could hear the CEO. And that was something Starbucks was not doing at the time. I'm happy to say within 3 days of our call-in campaign, Starbucks relented. This sounds like ancient history now that every single company's conference call is listenable for free online today. But so that love of telling the king or queen the truth and the importance of that, I think it starts there. Your question was about our culture. I'm going to throw out 4 things real quick. If you want to ask me about any of them, we can talk more about them. But our core values, and specifically one of our core values, which is called Your Motley, is a fun thing about our culture. We have an internal learning university we call Fool You, which we could talk about. We have had wonderful people in to speak to our company, you being one of those, Les, and that's an important kind of conference series that we have all year round, where we learn Fool's Errand, which is a fun little game that we play at the end of each of our monthly huddles, where we all hands meeting as a company. So we can talk about any of those if you like. I'm putting that forward as examples of kind of cultural institutions at our company that we've kind of built up, like those ancient cities. You kind of build it up over the years and decades, and whatever keeps working, you keep doing. And so those are some examples.
Well, the thing has struck me consistently, David, and just in terms of a little bit of perspective from an outsider's point of view, I get to see the inside of a lot of organizations as part of the privilege of what I do. And most organizations can show you a side of them that's pretty impressive. The thing that really strikes me about the Motley Fool is that commitment to culture goes the whole way through. I've met your folks in every possible type of environment, individually, in small groups and in large groups, and it doesn't matter what way you slice or dice it. As you said earlier, the folks that work for you are very loyal and they're very committed. What do you think of those 4 things that you listed, and of anything else? What is it draws that commitment out?
I think of those 4, maybe I'll highlight sort of Fool You, our internal learning university, because we learned this from Pixar. There's a great story that Pixar tells. Pixar was one of my stock picks, by the way. A tragedy for me when Disney bought them. Not so tragic because we still own the Disney shares and Disney's done pretty well, but we really love Pixar as an independent public company and a stock that we were holding for the long term. But one of the things Pixar talks about is how they invest in their people. And the old story goes that the Pixar CEO pulls up to the Disney CEO at a bar. This is a mostly true story. And the Disney CEO says, we're all about ideas. That's what we're about as Disney. And we need our next big movie needs to be this meets this, because that's what we need. We need to have the big idea that touches off our business. And the Pixar CEO essentially says, we couldn't disagree more. We believe that any movie is actually 10,000 ideas. Every camera angle you choose, every line of dialogue, all of those are ideas. And so the only way to succeed in this environment going forward is to have great people. Because when you have great people, they make the 10,000 decisions that make it possible. And so out of that, Pixar started its own internal university. And we had the head of Pixar, the dean of that university, come speak to us some years ago. And we realized how important it would be to create an internal learning organization within our company. So if you're at the Motley Fool today, you might have a class at 10 o'clock this morning, and it might be on Business Models 101, or it might be on how to pick better teams for March Madness this March, or it's a motley assemblage of different topics. And who are our teachers? The answer is our teachers are our employees. Might be a VP, might be our new receptionist. You don't know who's going to be teaching these things because it's open to all. And then our learners are the people who simply want to take that course or learn that. And these aren't semester long. In a lot of cases, they might just be one-off. Sometimes they are longer form, though. We have students who go on an 18-month learning journey and graduate from our university, and we've just graduated our third class. So we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now. But I think if you're hearing me then, you're hearing that teaching and learning are just critical aspects of our corporate culture, and it really is, it runs right through the company, right? In a sense, everyone is involved in some way, shape, or form. So that would be an example of, I guess, what you're talking about.
And I know we met first, David, whenever my first book, Predictable Success, had just come out, and I'd love to have you share whether or not, and if so, how the Predictable Success Synergist model has helped in that development internally.
I have to say, Les, I first heard about you when you did an interview on David Allen's Getting Things Done podcast, and I enjoyed your perspective so much that I went right out and bought what at that time was your new book, Predictable Success, and that was, again, 4 or 5 years ago, and just your framework for predictable success and the stages that companies go through resonated with me on 2 different levels. The first being as a business person myself, as an entrepreneur, as somebody that I could look in at my own business. And what I loved about your book, Les, was that I could look at where I thought our company was, but more importantly, I could know the actions or best actions that we could take to get us where we needed to be if we weren't where we wanted to be. So I would say the 30,000-foot level of looking at anyone's business, and then right down there at the ground level, knowing what to do if things need to be done to get that business into better shape, resonated with me on that level first as a business person. Second, though, as an investor, I really enjoy your framework because I look at other people's companies and I ask, is that company on the treadmill? Like, where's Microsoft today, for example? Or we might ask, where's a company like Netflix today, which I mentioned earlier? So it's a really fun, in a way, I can't really know those organizations that well because I'm like you, Les, I don't get to go in and work with different companies, every week. But I do, these days, the Internet makes it possible for us all to get to know companies much better. You can look at Glassdoor, where employees are putting up reviews. You can see videos of the CEO giving interviews on Bloomberg. The list goes on and on of the ways you can really get to know a company even if you're not there. And so I've used the framework as well as an investor, that Buffett line again. I'm a better investor because I'm a businessman and vice versa. So I've really appreciated the Predictable Success work, and I continue to reread the book.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that very much, David. I must say, There are three people. I'll not embarrass the other two because I don't have the permission to do it right now. But there are three people who know and use the predictable success model. Who I know when I'm slated to go talk to them, I'm going to learn something because they ask me questions I've never been asked before about the use of the model. And you're one of those people. And I remember whenever we again, I don't know break confidence about Motley Fool, but I remember we did do a very detailed look at the visionary synergist operator processor mix within the organization, and we had all of your folks find out what their style is, and you brought me back in to go through an analysis of that, and I came out of that half day knowing more about my own model than when I went in, and that was because of the degree to which you and many of your colleagues have really invested themselves in making the best use of it. So it's been a mutually profitable relationship in that regard, and I have that to thank you for. In closing, David, what are the challenges ahead for Motley Fool? What are you working on now that's new, fun, and exciting?
Well, I think, we're at a stage, I would say we're kind of in a whitewater stage right now as a business. Okay. That's within your framework kind of back where we are. And so it's interesting because the challenge, therefore, is to scale. And to scale in an ever-growing, more complex environment.
Right.
And, I think for most growth companies, and that's definitely the stage where we've been for probably about 10 years or so, I'd say now, those are the kinds of questions you have to answer. So for us, I think a phrase that you may have used, Les, I probably steal a lot from you and forget that I'm stealing it from you, but, being a machine for decision-making, for good, effective decision-making, building the corporation into being, I love gizmos and machines and robots and systemic things that do stuff on their own. And so I think where we are as a business today, we need to add a little bit more process in and make ourselves a little bit more of a machine as we go from maybe, again, we're not in any hyper-growth at all, but we hired 50 in the last year net, so we went from 210 to actually 220 to 270. As you hit that magical number of 250, you start to not recognize, everyone's name, or you start to recognize not everyone's face. So it starts to become larger, and that's always going to be a big challenge. So I would say those are our biggest challenges as a company. Where I don't think things are challenged, often people think that they would be challenged, is just navigating the stock market. A lot of people thought that the fiscal cliff would crash our market, or thought that the banking system and its problems would make it so no one should buy stock in 2009. But as it turns out, the stock market has almost doubled. It has actually more than doubled from its lows in 2009. And we continue to find great companies and companies that we want to be part investors of. We're not traders, and so I would say that's not the challenging part. I think that we're very good at helping people invest better, but our near-term challenges are just scaling, complexity.
Well, it's been an absolute privilege to be allowed to have been part of, and some transparency and visibility into how you and Tom have managed that over the last number of years. As it's been very clear, I'm sure, in this call, I'm an enormous fan, and I just recommend to everybody, all of our listeners, if you don't know David and Tom's business, if you don't know the Motley Fool, go to foolcot.com today. Check it out. They're just the best in the business. David, I hope we can get you back in a couple of years from now and tell us how you've navigated that act of scaling.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Les. Thank you for all your work. I know that everyone listening to it today is so pleased and grateful for your contributions, not over the years, but in some cases I know over the decades. But I'm happy to say for the last 5 years or so, you've enriched my business and investing life. Keep doing the good thing. Thank you, Les.
Thank you.